Welcome to John Thompson Music. I'm very excited today to have a wonderful musician performer with a ton of experience. Primarily a bass player, he also plays guitar, knows a lot about vintage instruments, guitar repair, and is currently the bassist with Kevin and Company. Bill Cherensky.
Any doubt.
Yeah. Now, what about I know like you played a bunch of original music and you play covers and stuff like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about what it takes to do either thing and what the differences are?
Yeah, I think it's just a different set of challenges that when you play originals, you don't have a set part to learn. You have to make the part. So you have to, the challenge is okay, this is what the guitar and drums are doing. What does the bass need to do? And that's difficult because there's any number of options available to you. And there have been many times. I mean, the first original music I started playing was like 1982, I think. And if I listen to tapes of that now, I'm like, why did I play that? And one of the things that I did when I first started playing originals, at that point I was only playing for like 8 or 9 years, I guess, if that. And I would double the guitar line. And that's like the obvious, easy thing to do. But it's, I came to realize later, it's probably, sometimes it is the right thing to do. Sometimes it's really the best thing. But 80% of the time or something, you should avoid that. And the bass should do something independent of the guitar, and that's more interesting and more pleasing to the ear. So that's something that I learned to do. Come up with it. What is it? What should I do? What is the thing here? And I remember recording the first BB and the Stinger CD, and the first track on it was Paid in Full. And I remember Butterfield Studio. I didn't have a part ready. I don't know why I was recording, and I'm sitting there listening to everything through the studio monitors. And then what I played, which was just bass, it was in G, and I just did something like G to F, sort of a thing. And I was like, that's it. That's what this song needs. That's the, and I think I was pretty close on that one. And there's other songs I played with Bernie. I was like, why did I do that? Why? That's so not the right thing to do there. So that's the challenge of doing originals, and it is a challenge. Doing covers, it's kind of down to
Excuse
the individual. Some people go on the theory like, I'm not going to try and cop this note for note. I'm going to just get close, or I'm going to do it my own way. And that's cool. But I find that in most cases, when you do it that way, it's out of expedience rather than because it's some sort of feeling you have about it. It's time consuming to learn everything note for note, every little nuance that they did. So my feelings, I try to get as close as possible to the original. I feel like they didn't just slop this together when they recorded the song.
exactly.
They composed that part for a reason, and that's the way it should be played. And sometimes it's like I just can't tell what they're doing, and I'm not going to do it. And there were even some couple of pieces that I learned with Kevin and Company where I got pretty close, but I kind of sloughed off a few things. And now, since we're here quarantined, I went down and I learned them, and I got them. I got the little things because well, I don't want to spend an hour learning the chorus to this song exactly the way it was done. And then I went back and did it, and I like to do it that way, whether anyone appreciates it or not. I like to do it that way if possible.
Yeah, it's always good. I always try to, like a lot of times I'll learn something and I'll give it a good overview, maybe play it a few times with the band, but I keep checking back and keep trying to refine things
I've done that
after a
too.
while. I kind of go back. Some things are just real easy and you figure them out note for note and you go in, and you go in and play them. But that's definitely a good point that you brought up. I mean, if it's a hit song, there's a reason why that it's a hit song. I mean, people that listen to cover music want to hear the song. They don't want to hear what you have to, you know, put in all kinds of extra stuff. I'm not saying that you can't be yourself and add a little personality, but
Yeah.
at least get it really close if you can.
Well, it also depends on the situation. Like with BB and the Stingers, it was like half cover and half originals,
Hmm.
and our covers were kind of more like versions
Right.
than covers. So in that case, you can do your own thing if you want to.
Hmm.
But if it's a cover band, if it's all you're doing are covers, I think you have more of an incentive to get as close to the record as possible.
And especially if you're in a tribute band. If you're in a tribute band,
And
you
absolutely,
better nail it. You know, you better
yeah,
nail it.
I feel the same way too. Yeah.
All
And then
right. So let's let's move on a little bit from here. What's your take? Modern basses versus you know, the vintage stuff. What's your take on that?
well, I, for me, I'm always going to be a four-string guy because it's the instrument that I fell in love with. Although I can see for a lot of contemporary music, you pretty much have to have a five-string bass. It's just part. A lot of music that's come into existence since the '80s or '90s just calls for that. I've been on a few cruises and stuff, and I see all the cruise ship band bass players have fives. And I don't think they get the gig with a four-string bass, you know, because they wouldn't be able to play. I mean, they could play the note an octave higher, but it's not comfortable to me. It's a wide neck. I never did it enough. I've had a few five strings. I can never get used to it to the point where I could not think the B string, the lowest string on the bass has to be the E string. My brain keeps
Mhm.
thinking that. I guess you'd get past that. A six I would never need because its main purpose would be for soloing and like chord melody solos and stuff, and I'm not interested in that so much. Um, so I wouldn't need it. And the neck is just gigantically wide on those. As far as the four string stuff, as far as like active basses versus passive, for
Mhm.
me, I mean, there's some good sounding active basses, but it's something else to go wrong. It's always something to go wrong, and it's another thing to be twiddling with all night. Like when you have a set of controls on your bass, and you have it on the amp too, and I'm a twiddler. I would always be, maybe I don't know if I have the bass up too high, or maybe it needs a little more mid or so. So I don't like it for that, you know, for simplicity's sake. And I always just seem to gravitate to jazz basses. You know, my first decent bass was a 75 precision, and then about a year later I got a jazz bass, which felt really weird to me for a while, and then I got used to that and really never looked back. So as far as like vintage Fenders versus modern ones, I don't think there's any comparison. I think some of the custom shop stuff is close. It's kind of like a vintage Fender for people that never own the real thing or can't afford it anymore, which is like me. But I know you own a beautiful '62 jazz bass, so you know. But there's just something about those basses that you think they'd be able to duplicate them because it's a very simple instrument how it's made, but they just don't. Like the custom shop '64 jazz bass, that the Sunburst one that I use a lot, that reminds me a lot of a '65 I used to have. And but if I really like think about it in detail for detail, there's, there isn't a square inch of it that isn't different from an original in some respect, but it's a good bass anyway.
Yeah, the active sounding basses definitely have whole different thing going on. I know the passive. I use just a regular passive bass as my main axe,
Is that
and it seems like it has like a, you know, it just has a fuller, rounder sound, and the
how
pickup seems louder. What do you think?
I think active seems louder. It's louder, but it's how it sits in the track. If you're recording, or even if you're live, I've noticed that active basses they tend to blare over the other instruments, and passive ones meld with the other music more. If
You
that
think it blends more? It has more of a rounder blend,
yeah, and
smoother.
I remember. Is that by the way that I know you changed the pickup in that OLP Music Man Stingray type bass that you put in.
Right, the one
Is that
right behind
passive
me.
now
That
though? Is that
what's that?
passive?
Yeah, that's passive. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, that's got a bass lines pickup in it. I don't know if that's a direct Music Man pickup.
no, bass lines is what Seymour Duncan called his line of bass pickups. And
Oh, so that's a Seymour Duncan that I have in
Duncan.
my bass. You see, I don't even know. I'm one of these guys. Hey, yeah, that's a Music Man pickup. Yeah, let me get that. And I'm the guy that takes the tone control and volume and just whacks it all the way open, and that's it. I don't
I
I
used to
don't
do that.
touch the controls on my bass. I just leave
Used
it
to do
wide
that
open.
all the time. I used to run and it's when you using your own amp 3 sets, you can do that because you can pretty much if you're going to be using a similar sound all night, you don't have to touch the tone control. You could set the amp the way you want it. Leave the tone control wide open. It's never you never have a reason to cut back the treble. But since I've been going to these open mics, I use the tone control a lot more because I find that a lot of people's amps are set way brighter than I would set it. And it's and so I have no choice. I don't want to start changing people's settings. Some people don't mind. Other people like bridle at it, like fucking guy, change my
Yeah,
setting.
change my settings on my
Yeah.
amp.
So I just started rolling it back, and there were certain also amps these days have tweeters in them. They have horns, and like I hate that. So it's automatically it's going to be bright, too bright for me. So I start turning the tone control down. And sometimes I had it even like off, yeah, to get it
Oh, the
about where I
tone,
want
just the tone control.
just the tone
Yeah,
control.
turn
Yeah.
it off.
And then after years of playing jazz bass, jazz bass, you don't have an overall volume control. You have an individual volume for each pickup. And it wasn't until I started playing with Kevin that I had to really vary the volume. I used to leave that wide open. Once in a while, I would back off one pickup or the other, just favor the bridge or the neck pickup for certain songs. But I never really, any volume difference I was able to achieve by varying picking attack. But since I was playing with Kevin, it wasn't enough, and I found myself like having to turn 2 volumes. And now I don't know if I had one pickup set higher than the other on purpose, I probably lost that. So I converted the two jazz basses I have to master volume, blend, master tone. It's just regular 3 knob jazz basses. So now I have an overall volume, and then I have a blend pot.
Oh, and you did that yourself. You wired it then.
Yeah, so I do work on guitars. It was nothing for me, and I've been pretty happy with that. It's
Yeah,
been working out
my
for me.
my Ken Smith bass. I really like the blend knob. I mean, it's got stacked bass and treble, and it's got this and it's got that. But I definitely like the blend knob because I could just go down and just turn that slightly to the back pickup or slightly to the front pickup, and it makes a big difference. You know, is that how
And
you
that's
have
what,
yours set up with a blend? Is that what you
yeah,
blend on there?
that's what I did. Which it's more common in active basses, and
Hmm.
in passive basses, this is something it was a learning curve for me because I read up on it a lot before I did it. I had heard that if you use a blend pot on a passive bass where the center detent is, you're going to lose output. And what I read was you have to use a certain taper pot called an MN taper pot, which is it's actually not an audio taper. It's a kind of a linear taper pot. So linear taper pots are like more on and off, contrary to what the name implies. Audio taper pots are more gradual, which is what you want. But that's where you get the loss in the middle. So people were saying on one forum I looked at that you should use if you have 250K pots and you're going to have a blend, since it's a ganged pot, that you have two pots together in parallel, you use 500K because you're going to end up with 250 because they're in two pots in parallel. So I said that
Oh, I
makes sense,
see.
and I
Right.
tried it, and I put it in. It was like the taper. It was like on and off switch. So then I went back on the forum and read, and they're like, oh, the taper is less gradual. It's more linear with a 500K pot than on a 250K pot. It's just the nature of them. So I was like, oh, I can't deal with this. So then I bought 250K MN taper pot, ganged pot, blend pot, and that worked for me a lot better. You didn't get the loss. Um, and then at that, with one of those bases, I put in uh, Fralin split jazz, which is kind of like a jazz bass made like a precision pickup with like it's one coil for the G and D string, one coil for the E and A, so it's hum canceling. And with those pickups, I did get the loss in the middle. So that was like around the holidays. I said, oh, do I want to go back to the two knobs to use these, forfeit the blend pot to use these pickups? And I was like, nah, put the old pickups back in, and I sold the Fralins. So I mean, I didn't know. I still to this day I don't know why that was, but it was. So, but yeah, I kind of like the blend thing.
Is there a difference between setting up a guitar and a bass, or is it just kind of the same thing? And I know that it's also a personal thing. You want to talk about that a little bit? Because I've had basses set up by people who are pretty much world famous and gotten it home and like hated it and had to totally readjust the neck and redo the intonation. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot of bass players whose basses I pick up, their action seems high to me. It's higher than I would set my own bass up, and it is it's all uh, differing factors that all interact with each other when you talk about setting up an instrument like the action. Like the first thing you need to do is make sure the neck is straight, straight as it could be without buzzing, which is almost perfectly straight. And then from there you'd adjust the bridge and the intonation, because if you adjust the action at the bridge first and the neck has to be straightened, then now the action is going to be too low.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to do everything in sequence and all these things factoring together. Like if it's a bolt-on neck, the neck angle you can shim it if you need to. And all these things tying together make a difference. But I noticed a lot of basses that other people's, it's like, man, I don't know how they play it. It's like a tank. Like for me, I want the action on a bass almost as low as on an electric guitar. And I don't see why it shouldn't be that way. And then that does mean that the frets have to be leveled very meticulously, because you could buzz. It very well might buzz if everything isn't set up perfectly fret wise, fingerboard wise. So that's
Yeah,
one thing that I find.
yeah, I like my action. I like my action pretty low as I can get it. But I use round wound strings, and for like the first week, it sounds buzzy and clicky
Yep.
until the strings wear in. What type of strings do you recommend? I mean, I know there's different strings for different sounds and all of that. And I'm not much of a techie guy. I just use the round wound string, whatever's on sale at the time.
Yeah, I mean, after so many years of doing it, I kind of could deal with any round wound string of the same gauge. But lately I've been using Rotosound swing bass, but it's not the one that I use. Is like the RS66, the original set that Entwistle endorsed in 1966. It's 45, 65, 80, 105. So that 80 A string is not, it usually normally would be an 85. And that feels weird to me. It's what Entwistle wanted for whatever reason. So they make another set with an 85 A string, and that's what I've been using. And the Roto sounds I like. I like stainless steel round wounds, which they are, but the Rotos don't last really long. But it's okay because when they get a little bit dead, it's kind of a good sound. I kind of like that sound these days. But I remember when I was playing with Bernie, I used to change bass. We were working a lot, but I used to change them once a month. Now I change them once a year. That's a lot. Back then I was using GHS Super Steels, and it was a weird gauge, like 42 to 102, and I would like drifted away from that over time to try and various things. Just like I was went through a point, I was like, I don't care, just rotor sounds, Ernie balls, whatever. And I went back to those super steels, and it felt really weird to me, really like light and like rubber bands. Taste can change over time. Having you mentioned about round rounds being buzzy when you first put them on, yeah, they are. And like with flats, you can get the action lower a lot of times because they don't vibrate as much as round rounds.
Mhm.
You know, but they're flats, and that's another thing. I kind of sometimes I think about putting flats on one of my basses. I don't have that many anymore. I only have like two jazz basses, and I put flats on them, and then I'm like, I'm taking them right off. But if I had more basses, I probably would because I wind up rolling off a lot of the highs on round rounds anyway. So why do I need round rounds? I'm kind of like trying to get almost a flat roundy sound. It's sort of the feel of round rounds that I'm used to a lot. Flats can be stiff of the same gauge.
Now, being a guitar repair person, um, I know there was, I don't know whether it's a rumor or what it is, but I heard that those roto sounds really, really rip up the frets a little bit. And
They
not being a repair person where I can't repair my own bass, I've been kind of shying away from the roto sounds. I used to use them long, long time ago.
they have that reputation, but I have to say I don't think they're harder on frets than any stainless steel string. Stainless steel strings are hard on frets. There's no doubt because if you have a war between stainless steel and nickel silver, the stainless steel is going to always win. Now they have stainless steel frets. I've never heard them on a bass at all, and I've only the only guitars I've played with them are Parker Flies, which came stock with them, and I think were the first instruments to have them. I've never refretted a guitar with them. Nobody's asked me so far, but it makes sense. Like it to me, it seems a little crazy to have you know nickel frets and be using stainless steel strings, but that's the way it's been for ages. Um, but yeah, I think for rock bass, rotos are the ultimate strings. I think so. But any round really will do the trick.
Yeah, that's why, like, if I see the Adarios on sale, or if I see GHS on sale, or if I
Yeah,
see
they're fine.
Ernie balls on sale, I get them and generally adapt to them a little bit as long as I can get close to my gauge of strings. And
I
that's
remember in the late '80s, Highway Music used to carry these Yamaha BB series basses, which are really good
Mhm.
sounding basses. But a lot of it was the strings. They had strings that looked like rotosounds, stainless steel, and they had red silk on the ends. And I don't know how I discovered it, but somehow I took a set off of one of those Yamahas and put it on one of my basses. It sounded fantastic. So I would like John from Highway would get in a new Yamaha bass, and I would buy a new set of GHS boomers for it, and he'd give me the still new Yamaha strings. And then I was like, John, can you get these strings? Like, can you get Yamaha bass strings? And he said no. He looked into it and he said no. But what it was about them, they were really rough, really coarse, like really rough on your fingers, and I think that's what gave them this like aggressive sound that they had. And I remember, I could be wrong, but I might remember like rotor sounds in the '70s being more like that. I don't think they're as aggressive sounding today as the ones that they made in the '70s, but it might just be my imagination.
Well, maybe they got word that their strings were way too hard on frets and they changed them a little bit.
It's
Who
possible.
knows? I mean, it is possible. So now that this COVID thing is happening here and everything, and I know that you play live a lot and that you really enjoy playing live. What have you been doing now that you're home besides rehashing some of the songs that you do play?
Well, I took some of those songs and then learned some new ones and just recorded me playing them in front of the computer. and just to do it, and posted them on Facebook just for no reason other than to just do it, and like keep my mind active and the fingers moving, and learned that certain artists, their whoever owns the rights to their material doesn't want it on Facebook or YouTube, like Ozzy Osbourne. It took me a long time to learn. I don't know. There's a lot of bass going on in that song, and I learned it, and I got everything down, and I recorded it, posted it on Facebook, and they immediately took it down. And you can appeal that. I appealed it, and they said, by May 1st you will have a response from Sony Music, and they just said nah, which I knew they would, but so that's a little bit frustrating. But yeah, it's good to do it, and for mental and physical reasons. And I have some people now that want me to they do this jamming with Zoom like we're using now, where everyone he sent me a click tape, like the basic track with a click, so I can record my part and then email him my part, and he'll edit it together with what other people have done, and then he'll post it on Facebook. So I'm still learning the tune, a couple of days when I get everything together, and I'll send that to him, and hopefully he'll post it. But so that's something I will be doing. That's new for me because I'm not very internet savvy. But it's have to do something to keep mentally and physically active in
Yeah,
these times.
it's good that we have something to keep us occupied where other people have to kind of try to find a hobby, or they got to try to find something to do to keep them busy. Like, what do they do? Do I do gardening? Do I do this? We know what to do. When if we're quarantined, we're going to practice. We're going to, we're going to learn songs. We're going to post on the internet like this. Like, that's how this whole show came about. And
Well, that's a very good point, and I never stopped to consider that non-musicians might not have something to occupy themselves like that. And it's true. Like if I guess if you don't have a hobby and you're not telecommuting to your job, you have a lot of time to fill. And so it is something good that we have that we to take advantage of. Yeah.
well, in closing here, if we wrap this up, what would you tell a young aspiring bass or guitar player that would be an important thing to help them advance their career?
Well, one thing I would say to either guitar or bass player, to any musician starting, is learn to sing if you don't already, because I never did, and it's really hampered me. That's why I think it's something that frustrates Kevin, because I told him I don't sing, and he thought I would kind of grow into it or something, stick a mic in front of me, and I was like, this guy's never going to sing. And like I can't sing. I would have had a lot more and better gigs had I been able to sing even background vocals. So that's one thing. If I could go back and like mentor my 16 or 17-year-old self, I would say learn to sing. And the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to learn. Don't be afraid to put the time in to study your instrument, to learn your craft the right way, because you'll never have the time like you do now. When you're a teenager, you don't appreciate the time that you have, and your brain is still open to learning much more than it will be when you're an adult. And to bass players, I would say, and this is another thing I didn't do, but I would say learn all the James Jamerson stuff. If you have a mastery of that, you've got so much. You could adapt that to any style. You like I mentioned, I like John Paul Jones and Prakash John because they took that sort of a thing and put it in a rock context. It lends itself to that, and it sounds really cool. And if you know that, you can play blues. I wouldn't necessarily say you could play jazz coming from that, but it wouldn't hurt. Um, I would say, any bass player starting out, get the Standing in Shadows of Motown book and learn it, and you'll be doing really great if you do that.
Well, it's certainly great advice, Bill. And it's
Thank
always a
you.
pleasure talking to you. We've been
Same
friends.
here.
We've been friends for so long, and it's good to get a little more insight. Like you were saying the other day, we're used to talking to each other in a loud club, screaming over the music, and one finger in your ear.
Yeah.
So it's been a pleasure, Bill. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And till next time, I'll see you.
Yeah,
All
you're
right.
welcome. You too. Okay.
Peace,
Nice.
brother. Thank you for tuning in to John Thompson Music. If you found value in this content, please leave a comment. Hit the subscribe button. Go to my YouTube channel playlists and look under JT Live. That's where you'll find all my free stuff, bass lessons, guitar lessons, video podcasts, and the like. Until then, peace, love, and music for all.